The year was 3452, and the once mighty Federation had fallen. The galaxy, once united under a banner of peace and cooperation, was now a shattered remnant of its former self. The enemy, the Zal, a ruthless, war-hungry species, had struck with precision, and the Federation's defense was swift but futile. The Zal were relentless, their massive warships capable of decimating entire fleets in minutes. With their unmatched firepower and cunning, they destroyed the heart of human civilization and left nothing but ruins in their wake. On the isolated world of Felos IV, the last known human colony fought to survive. This desolate planet, with its harsh landscapes and frigid temperatures, had been chosen as a final refuge after the fall of Earth and the collapse of human governments. The Federation had hoped it would remain untouched, far away from the war zones that now plagued the galaxy. But the Zal were not known for mercy, and they would come for Felos IV, just as they had come for every other world. Captain Elena Seraphim stood at the helm of the colony's defense station, her face set in grim determination. She was one of the last surviving military officers of the Federation, and though she knew the odds were against them, she refused to surrender. Elena had seen too much, too many lives lost, too many friends and comrades turned to dust in the wake of the Zal invasion. "This is not over," Elena muttered to herself, watching the display screen showing the vast stretches of Felos IV's barren landscape. A world that once held great potential was now nothing more than a battleground for humanity's survival. She stared at the reports. Zal warships had been spotted on the outer rim of the system. It wouldn't be long before they reached the planet. The colony itself was a fragile outpost of life amidst a barren world. Tunnels and underground facilities offered some protection against the elements and the dangers that lurked on the surface. Yet, the real threats came from the skies. The colony's defense capabilities were limited, and Elena knew the Zal would overwhelm them soon enough unless a miracle occurred. "Captain, we've received a distress signal from the outer station," Lieutenant Jace Hawk reported from the communication console. He was a young officer, still with the naive hope of victory in his eyes, but Elena saw the cracks forming in his resolve. Elena nodded, her face hardening. "Prepare a response. Tell them to hold their ground, we're on our way." She made her way to the war room, where her trusted advisors and military strategists had gathered. The map of Felos IV's atmosphere was displayed on the central holoscreen, showing the growing encirclement of Zal warships. The Federation had long since run out of reinforcements, and the human forces left behind were a skeleton crew, ragtag groups of soldiers and engineers who had been left to fend for themselves. "Is there anything we can do to buy time?" Elena asked, her eyes scanning the grim faces around the table. Commander Zara Vale, a seasoned veteran of the Federation's elite forces, spoke up. "We've tried everything, Captain. Our defenses are practically useless against their technology. If they make it to the surface, they'll wipe us out in days. If we don't act now, we'll be completely overrun." Elena clenched her fists, her thoughts racing. The Zal had proven to be formidable enemies, yet there was something about humanity that they underestimated: resilience, determination, and the sheer will to fight. They had done it before, countless times. Humanity had always found a way to survive, even in the face of insurmountable odds. But the truth was undeniable. The colony's defenses were quickly crumbling, and there was little they could do to turn the tide. Elena's mind whirled as she processed the information. She could give the order to evacuate, but where would they go? The Zal were everywhere. "Prepare for a counteroffensive," Elena ordered, her voice steady despite the panic rising within her. "We'll make them pay for every inch of ground they take." The room fell silent as her subordinates exchanged glances, doubt evident in their eyes. But they didn't question her. "Not yet. We can't do this alone, Elena," Zara said quietly. "We need reinforcements, or this will be the last stand of humanity." Elena paused, the weight of her next words heavy on her chest. "Then we fight, Commander. No matter what. This is the last human colony. We can't give up now." She turned back to the holoscreen. The Zal ships were getting closer. A final battle loomed on the horizon, but something inside Elena refused to accept defeat. there was something more to humanity than just survival. They had always fought back. It was in their blood. And as long as one human still drew breath, they would not fall without a fight. The countdown to destruction had begun, and Elena knew that the final chapter of humanity was about to be written. As the final preparations for battle began, Captain Elena Seraphim found herself struggling with the weight of her decision. They had no reinforcements, no advanced technology to help them, just a colony of survivors armed with outdated weapons and determination. Yet, there was a spark of defiance in the air. Despite the overwhelming odds, a sense of unity and strength had risen among the human survivors. It was as if the very essence of humanity had been awakened, a force that would not be extinguished easily. Elena stood on the edge of the command center, watching as the colonists worked feverishly to fortify their positions. The hum of machinery, the voices of soldiers preparing for what would likely be their last battle, it was a haunting symphony of desperation. Yet, within that desperation, there was something else, defiance. "Captain, we've received a transmission from the underground resistance," Lieutenant Jace Hawk said, his voice tinged with hope. "They've got something to show us." "Patch it through," Elena ordered, her curiosity piqued. The underground resistance was a group of former Federation soldiers and civilians who had survived by staying hidden and launching guerrilla attacks on the Zal invaders. They had been a thorn in the Zal's side, but their presence had been limited. The Federation had lost contact with them months ago. Any word from them now was both unexpected and potentially crucial. The image on the screen flickered to life, revealing a weathered face framed by dark, unkempt hair. It was General Rook, the leader of the underground resistance. His face was lined with years of hardship, but his eyes burned with a fierce determination that Elena recognized instantly. "Captain Seraphim," General Rook's voice crackled through the static. "I know we're long overdue for a report, but we've discovered something that could turn the tide in our favor." Elena leaned forward, her heart racing. "What have you found, General?" Rook's lips curled into a grim smile. "A weapon. Not just any weapon, but something we've been working on for the past few months in secret. It's an ancient relic of the Federation, a prototype weapon that was abandoned before the war broke out. It's hidden deep within the ruins of a Federation research facility on the surface. If we can retrieve it, it could give us the firepower we need to strike back at the Zal." The mention of a weapon caught Elena's attention. She knew all too well the potential that lay in ancient Federation tech. Some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy had been lost during the Federation's fall, and any remnants of it could be their salvation. "Do you know where this facility is located?" Elena asked, her mind racing with possibilities. "We've located the facility's coordinates," Rook replied. "But it's not going to be easy. The Zal have a stronghold nearby, and the facility is surrounded by hostile terrain. Getting in and out will take everything we have." Elena glanced around the command center. The few soldiers they had left were exhausted and battered, their morale fragile after months of endless defense against the Zal. But this was a chance. A real chance. "How many men do you have available for this mission?" Elena asked. "Enough to make a push," Rook said, his voice unwavering. "But we'll need your help, Captain. We can't do this without you." Elena turned to Zara Vale, her trusted commander, who was busy coordinating the final defense strategies. The older woman's gaze met Elena's, and for a moment, they shared an unspoken understanding. Zara had been through countless battles, seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations, and yet there was something different about this one. The stakes were higher now. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity's future. "You know what needs to be done, Commander," Elena said, her voice firm. "We'll launch a mission to retrieve that weapon. We have no choice." Zara nodded, her expression resolute. "I'll prepare the teams, Captain. We'll leave at first light." Elena's mind raced as she prepared for the mission ahead. The weapon Rook had mentioned could be humanity's last hope, but it was a long shot. They had no idea what the weapon could do, or if it would even work. The risks were immense, but Elena had no other option. The Zal were coming, and the colony's defenses would not hold for long. She gathered her team in the briefing room, her eyes scanning the faces of those who would accompany her on this dangerous mission. The soldiers, the engineers, the medics, all of them were willing to give their lives for this cause. And in that moment, Elena knew that this mission wasn't just about a weapon. It was about hope. Hope for the future. Hope for humanity. "Listen up," Elena said, her voice steady as she addressed the group. "This is our only shot. We retrieve that weapon, and we use it to strike back. We make them pay for every inch of ground they've taken. We fight for our families, our friends, and every human who has fallen. We fight because humanity will not go quietly into the night." The soldiers nodded, a fierce fire igniting in their eyes. They knew the risks, but they also knew that this was their moment to change the tide of the war. They were going to make history. And so, under the cover of darkness, the team set out for the Federation research facility, unaware of the dangers that awaited them. The mission was fraught with peril, but there was something undeniable about the fire that burned in their hearts. They were humanity's last hope, and they would not fail. Not while they still had breath in their lungs. As the first light of dawn broke over Felos 4, the team ventured into the wilderness, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The clock was ticking, and the fate of the last human colony rested on their shoulders. The cold winds of Felos 4 whipped through the barren landscape, carrying with them the smell of dust and decay. The team moved swiftly across the rocky plains, their heavy boots crunching against the frozen ground. The journey to the Federation research facility was treacherous, with towering cliffs and deep ravines that separated them from their objective. The sun barely rose above the horizon, casting a pale glow over the desolate world, offering little warmth or comfort. Captain Elena Seraphim led the group, her eyes scanning the terrain ahead. Despite the frigid air and the constant danger lurking in every shadow, she remained focused. This was a mission they could not afford to fail. The stakes were too high. Behind her, Zara Vale, commander of the colony's forces, moved silently, her rifle slung over her shoulder. The rest of the team, a mix of soldiers, engineers, and medics, followed closely, their expressions grim but determined. "Keep your heads down," Elena ordered in a low voice. "The Zal patrols are active in this area. We don't want to attract attention." The mission was already risky, but the presence of Zal forces made it even more dangerous. Intelligence from General Rook indicated that the Zal had set up multiple patrols around the research facility, likely to keep prying eyes away. The facility itself had been abandoned long ago, but the Zal were not known for letting anything slip through their grasp. They would search every corner of the planet if it meant preventing the humans from gaining an advantage. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, the terrain grew increasingly difficult. Jagged rock formations rose up from the earth, creating a labyrinth of dangerous pathways. At several points, they had to scale cliffs or crawl through narrow passages, each step bringing them closer to the facility but also closer to discovery. Every sound was amplified in the stillness of the frozen wasteland, and every crack of a twig or scuff of a boot sent their nerves on edge. "How much further?" asked Lieutenant Jace Hawk, his breath coming in short puffs as the cold air stung his face. "Not far," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the tension that was building in her chest. "We're close." The silence around them was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of their footsteps. Suddenly, a low hum reached their ears, a sound that grew louder with each passing second. Elena's hand went instinctively to her sidearm, her eyes narrowing. The others did the same, their movements swift and practiced. "Zal," Zara muttered under her breath, her hand tightening around her weapon. "They're close." Elena motioned for the group to stop, and they crouched low, taking cover behind a rock outcrop. From their vantage point, they could see a Zal patrol advancing through a narrow valley ahead. The patrol consisted of 4 heavily armed Zal soldiers, their towering, insectoid forms nearly invisible against the rocky terrain. The creatures moved with precision, their multi-limbed bodies capable of scaling cliffs and moving through difficult landscapes with ease. They were a formidable enemy, and Elena knew they could not afford to be spotted. "We need to get past them without being detected," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. Zara glanced at the patrol, assessing their movements. We might be able to take them out quietly, but it'll take time. We can't afford to delay. Elena's mind raced. They had no time to waste. The Zal were relentless, and if they were spotted, their chances of completing the mission were slim. A direct confrontation could lead to a massacre, and the mission would fail before they even reached the facility. Wait for the right moment, Elena ordered, her voice a low murmur. We'll use the terrain to our advantage. Stick to the shadows. The team remained perfectly still, watching as the Zal patrol slowly moved closer, oblivious to the humans lying in wait. Elena's heartbeat drummed in her ears, and every muscle in her body was tensed, ready for action. The moment stretched into what felt like an eternity, but finally, the patrol reached the narrow pass just ahead. Elena gave a subtle signal, and the team sprang into action. They moved as one, using the jagged rocks and the craggy landscape for cover. Zara led the charge, her quiet footsteps almost inaudible as she moved into position behind the first Zal soldier. The others followed, their movements precise and calculated. Elena took a deep breath and darted forward, her knife raised high. With a single, fluid motion, she struck the first Zal soldier in the back of the neck. The creature crumpled silently to the ground, its weapon falling from its hand. Without missing a beat, the rest of the team moved in, dispatching the other Zal soldiers in quick, efficient strikes. There was no room for hesitation, no time for mercy. They had to move swiftly, or they would be overrun. Within moments, the Zal patrol was neutralized, and the team stood over their fallen foes. Elena wiped the blood from her blade, her heart still pounding in her chest. Move, she whispered. We don't have much time. The team quickly resumed their march, moving past the bodies of the Zal soldiers and deeper into the valley. The Federation research facility was close now, just beyond the next ridge. But even as they neared their goal, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Zal were known for their cunning, and Elena was certain that their enemies were always a step ahead. As they reached the top of the ridge, the facility finally came into view. It was a large, sprawling complex of metal and concrete, half buried beneath the earth. The structure had once been a hub of scientific innovation for the Federation, but now it was nothing more than a silent relic of a forgotten age. The surrounding area was eerily quiet, with no sign of any active patrols. But Elena knew better than to let her guard down. The real challenge had only just begun. The Federation research facility loomed in front of them, an abandoned ghost of human ingenuity. Its steel-gray walls were covered in layers of dust, its once sleek surface now marred by time and neglect. From a distance, it seemed peaceful, almost inviting, but Elena knew better. This place had been the heart of humanity's greatest advancements, and, for that very reason, it was likely to be well guarded, even in its dilapidated state. The Zal had a keen interest in anything that could give them an edge, and the thought of a Federation prototype weapon lying here, buried in its depths, made Elena uneasy. We've reached the perimeter, Zara said, her voice low as she scanned the surroundings. No signs of Zal patrols, but we can't be sure it's empty. Stay sharp. Elena nodded, signaling for the team to spread out and approach the facility with caution. The entrance was blocked by a heavy metal door, its surface rusted but intact. The team's engineers moved forward, pulling out their tools and beginning to hack into the facility's outdated security system. The door's mechanism had long since failed, but the engineers worked swiftly, their hands steady as they bypassed the ancient locks. Clear, one of the engineers announced, stepping back as the door creaked open with a groan. The group moved inside, weapons at the ready, their footsteps echoing in the hollow silence of the vast hall. The air inside was stale and thick, as if the facility had been sealed off from the outside world for centuries. The only sound was the soft hum of distant machinery, still running in low power, remnants of an era long gone. Keep your eyes peeled, Elena ordered. This place might still be rigged with security systems or traps. We don't know what we're walking into. The team proceeded deeper into the facility, their lights casting long shadows across the walls. Rows of research stations, abandoned equipment, and discarded papers littered the floor. It was a place frozen in time, a snapshot of humanity's progress before it was lost to war. But amid the ruins, Elena felt a strange sense of foreboding. The further they moved, the more uneasy she became. Something about this place didn't sit right with her. "Captain," Jay said, his voice tight. "Take a look at this." Elena approached him, finding him standing in front of a massive terminal, its screen flickering to life as the engineers had managed to hack into it. The display was filled with lines of code, complex, archaic, but somehow still functional. It wasn't just a security system. This terminal held something far more significant. "This is a research log," Jace continued, pointing to the screen. "It's from the original team that developed the weapon we're looking for." Elena leaned in closer, her pulse quickening. The terminal displayed the date of the log, several years before the fall of the Federation, and the name of the project, Genesis Protocol. "This is it," Elena murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "The weapon." The screen flickered again, and an image appeared, a schematic of a device unlike anything Elena had ever seen. It looked like a long, cylindrical barrel, but with intricate energy conduits running along its length. The notes on the schematic were in Federation code, but Elena could make out enough to understand the purpose of the device. It was a weapon designed to harness and amplify a star's energy, turning it into a devastating weapon capable of annihilating entire fleets. It was humanity's final trump card, a weapon of unimaginable power. "This is exactly what we need," Zara said, her voice laced with a mixture of awe and caution. "But it looks like we're not the only ones interested in it." Elena turned to look at her, her eyes narrowing as she followed the older woman's gaze. On the other side of the terminal, a row of doors led further into the facility, but one of them stood ajar, its heavy steel frame dented as though it had been forced open recently. "We're not alone," Elena said, her voice hardening. "Someone's been here." Without another word, the team advanced, moving cautiously toward the open door. The facility's dim lighting flickered, casting erratic shadows along the walls. Elena could feel the tension rising with every step. They were getting closer to their goal, but the uncertainty of who, or what, might be lurking within only made the situation more dangerous. The door creaked as they pushed it open, revealing a large, empty room. Its walls were lined with old storage containers, crates, and broken equipment. At the center of the room stood a large metallic door, different from the others. It was pristine, as if untouched by time. The markings on the door matched those found in the Federation's most classified research facilities. This was the heart of the project. As the team approached the door, a low, mechanical hum filled the room. Elena's eyes narrowed, and she signaled for them to stop. "Trap," she whispered. "Get ready." The door slid open slowly, revealing a darkened chamber beyond. But instead of finding the weapon, they were met with a shocking sight. The room was filled with frozen bodies, humans, or what was left of them. Their faces were twisted in expressions of terror, their bodies suspended in stasis, frozen in mid-motion. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she scanned the room. These were the original researchers who had worked on the Genesis Protocol. Each of them had been caught in some sort of containment field. The bodies were arranged around a central pedestal, and there, sitting atop it, was the weapon they had come for. The weapon was more magnificent than anything Elena had imagined. Its sleek, metallic surface pulsed with energy, as if it were alive, waiting for someone to unlock its power. But the bodies around it painted a grim picture. "It looks like they failed," Jay said, his voice soft, almost reverent. "Whatever they were doing here, it didn't end well." Elena stepped forward cautiously, her eyes never leaving the weapon. "We can't afford to fail. We need to activate it, now." But as her hand reached for the controls, a voice echoed from the shadows, sending a chill down her spine. "Not so fast, Captain." Elena spun around, her weapon drawn, her heart pounding. From the darkness of the chamber emerged a figure, a human, but not one she recognized. Clad in the dark armor of a Federation officer, the figure's face was obscured by a helmet, but the voice was unmistakable. You've come too late, the figure said, stepping into the dim light. This weapon belongs to the Zal now. The figure stepped forward, its voice cold and mechanical, like the sound of grinding metal. Elena's pulse quickened, her mind racing. The Federation officer's armor was old, but the silhouette was unmistakable, the markings, the design, even the stance, all of it spoke to someone with the same training as her. But this man was no ally. Who are you? Elena demanded, her grip tightening on her weapon. You're human. Why are you working with the Zal? The armored figure remained silent for a long moment, as if savoring the suspense. Then, with a slow motion, he reached up and removed his helmet, revealing a familiar face, scarred, weathered, but undeniably human. Elena's heart skipped a beat as recognition hit her. Captain Seraphim, the man said, his voice low and filled with an eerie calm. It's been a long time. Commander Rook? Elena whispered, the name barely escaping her lips. The shock in her voice was palpable. General Rook, the very man who had promised the underground resistance's aid, was standing before her, an enemy now. He had betrayed everything they had fought for. Rook's face was grim, his eyes cold as he regarded her. The years had not been kind to him, but there was something in his expression that betrayed a darkness that Elena hadn't seen before. Something changed in him, a shift that had turned him from a beacon of humanity's defiance to a shadow of its destruction. You, Elena said, taking a step back. You sold us out. You've been working for the Zal all along, haven't you? Rook's lips curled into a twisted smile. It's not that simple, Captain. I didn't sell out. I joined them. The Federation was a failure. A broken system built on lies and corruption. The Zal, however, are the future. They understand power. They understand survival. And they offered me something the Federation never could, victory. Elena's mind raced as she processed his words. This wasn't just a betrayal of the resistance, it was a betrayal of everything humanity had fought for. The Zal were the invaders, the enemy, and yet Rook had aligned himself with them for power. For survival, yes, but at what cost? You're deluded, Elena said, her voice hardening. The Zal won't spare humanity. They'll wipe us out. And they'll use that weapon you're guarding to do it. Rook's eyes darkened, his hands flexing as he stepped closer. You don't understand, do you, Elena? The Zal can save us. This weapon, it's the key. The Genesis Protocol is beyond anything the Federation ever dreamed of. It'll give them the power to crush the enemies of the Zal, including you, and it'll give me the power to shape this galaxy in my image. Elena shook her head in disbelief. You've gone mad. You're willing to destroy humanity's future to serve them? After everything we've lost, everything we've fought for, you think you can control them? I don't need to control them, Rook said, his tone dark and confident. I just need to control the weapon. The Zal have given me access to everything I need. Once I activate it, the balance of power will shift. I'll be the one calling the shots, not them. His eyes locked onto hers, and Elena felt a chill run down her spine. And I'm offering you a choice, Captain. Join me. Help me unlock the full potential of Genesis. Together, we can reshape the galaxy. Elena's hand trembled slightly as she gripped her weapon. You're mad if you think I'll help you. I'll stop you, Rook. Even if it costs me my life. Rook's expression hardened, and for a moment, he seemed to consider her words. Then, with a sigh, he shook his head. Such a waste. You were always too idealistic. But I guess that's why you're here, and I'm here. Without warning, Rook lunged toward the pedestal where the Genesis Protocol weapon sat, his hand reaching out to activate it. Elena reacted instinctively, her pulse racing as she moved to stop him, but the moment she stepped forward, the room trembled violently, and a deep hum filled the air. The Genesis weapon seemed to come alive, its energy pulsing with terrifying intensity. No! Elena shouted. Stop! But Rook had already connected his gauntlet to the control panel, and the weapon surged with a blinding light. For a split second, the room became a whirl of pure energy, the air thick with the power of a force that could level entire fleets. Elena shielded her eyes, feeling the heat of the weapon's energy searing her skin. As the light faded, the room fell silent once more, but the gravity of the situation had shifted. Rook stood triumphant, his chest heaving with excitement. The weapon was activated, its full power was now at his fingertips. He turned to face Elena, a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. "You see, Captain? It's already begun. The Zal will come, and we will strike at the heart of the Federation. But I'm afraid you won't be around to witness it." Elena's mind raced. She had to act, now star. The weapon was far too dangerous to let Rook control. But she was out of time. He was too close, the energy from the Genesis protocol was already charging, and if she didn't stop him, they would all be doomed. "Listen to me, Rook," Elena said, her voice urgent. "This weapon, it's not just a tool for power. It's a bomb. It'll destroy everything it touches. You'll be wiped out with the rest of us." Rook paused, his hand still hovering over the controls. For a brief moment, Elena saw doubt flicker in his eyes, but only for a moment. The madness was still there, lurking beneath the surface. "It doesn't matter," Rook said, his voice cold. "Victory is all that matters now." Elena's heart sank. The battle wasn't just for survival anymore, it was for the future of humanity. And Rook had already crossed the line. Without a second thought, Elena lunged forward, aiming her weapon directly at the pedestal. The air crackled with the energy of the weapon as the room filled with a deafening roar. In that moment, Elena knew what she had to do. She had to destroy the weapon, before it destroyed them all. But as she fired, she realized the cost of her decision. If she failed, the galaxy would fall into Rook's hands. And humanity would be lost forever. The blast from Elena's weapon struck the pedestal with a resounding shockwave that rattled the entire facility. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to freeze, time itself suspended in the tense air. The weapon, now damaged, emitted a high-pitched whine, a violent hum that resonated in Elena's chest like the heartbeat of a dying star. The Genesis protocol was unstable, the energy fields around it flaring wildly. "Damn it!" Rook shouted, his expression contorted with rage. He slammed his fist into the control panel, but the sparks and erratic flashing from the terminals only confirmed what Elena already knew. She had just made a desperate, life-or-death move, but it might have been too late. The facility shook violently as the power surges from the weapon reverberated throughout the room. The walls cracked, dust and debris raining down as the very structure of the building groaned under the pressure. The hum from the Genesis protocol grew louder, more intense, almost as though it were alive and struggling to escape its prison. "Everyone, out!" Elena shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. "We need to get to the exit, now!" Without waiting for a response, she sprinted toward the door, her boots pounding against the cracked floor. Her team followed close behind, weapons raised and hearts racing. Every moment felt like a countdown. Behind her, she could hear Rook's voice, furious, filled with venom as he cursed under his breath. But Elena didn't turn back. There was nothing left to do for him now. The corridors of the facility seemed to twist and stretch, each step echoing louder as the building's power core destabilized. The Genesis protocol had been their only hope for reclaiming a future for humanity, and now it was on the verge of catastrophic failure. Rook had destroyed any chance of securing it for the resistance. But more than that, he had awakened something darker. "We won't make it out," Zara yelled from the rear, her face tense as she pushed forward. "We need to disable the weapon, or we're all going to be vaporized." "We can't," Elena gritted her teeth as they rounded a corner. "Rook's already activated it, it's too late to reverse it now. We need to get to the surface before it blows." A sharp blast of air rushed past them as another part of the facility crumbled, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Elena could hear the low, terrible rumble of the weapon's energy expanding, a growing storm that threatened to tear the entire facility apart. The exit was close, only a few more turns, and yet, with every step, Elena felt the pressure mounting. Their escape was becoming less certain by the second. Behind them, the sound of collapsing walls and cracking floors told her that time was running out. "We're not going to make it," Jace yelled, his voice full of panic. "We will," Elena snapped back, her eyes scanning the path ahead. She was pushing herself beyond what she thought was possible, adrenaline surging through her veins. There was no room for doubt. The Zal were coming, the weapon was going to explode, and she would be damned if she didn't make sure the rest of the team survived. Another blast of energy sent them reeling as a section of the ceiling collapsed in front of them. Elena barely ducked in time, the debris missing her by inches. She could hear Zara behind her, struggling to maintain her footing, and Elena turned just long enough to grab her arm and pull her forward. "We're almost there," Elena shouted. But the ground trembled again, and this time, the facility's walls began to collapse in earnest. Dust filled the air, choking the breath from their lungs as they pushed forward through the wreckage. With every step, it became harder to see, harder to breathe. Elena could hear the others coughing and stumbling behind her, but she forced herself to keep moving. They were close, so close. And then, suddenly, there it was, the exit. A large, rusted door led out into the open air, though the outside was a blur of snow and dust as the wind howled. Elena didn't stop. She dashed for the door, her legs burning from the exertion, and threw herself against it. It gave way with a loud screech, and for a brief moment, fresh air flooded in, before the ground beneath them shuddered violently, the force of the Genesis Protocol's power rippling outward. A massive explosion erupted behind them, sending a shockwave that knocked them off their feet. Elena hit the cold ground hard, her head spinning as she tried to regain her bearings. The sky above her was dark, but not as dark as the devastation that was unfolding in the distance. The facility was coming apart, its final death throes marking the end of everything they had tried to achieve. Through the dust and chaos, Elena forced herself to her feet, her chest heaving with exhaustion. She scanned the horizon, but her heart sank as she saw the true scope of the disaster. The Genesis Protocol had detonated. The energy wave from the explosion radiated outward, tearing apart everything in its path. It wasn't just the facility that was destroyed, it was the planet itself. The energy from the weapon spread like wildfire across Felos 4, a burning pulse that ripped through the atmosphere, scorching the land, vaporizing everything in its wake. The shockwave from the explosion continued to ripple outward, destroying everything within a vast radius. It would take mere minutes for the destruction to reach the colony, and when it did, there would be nothing left. "Move! Move! Get to cover!" Elena screamed at the others as they struggled to their feet. But it was too late. The destruction was faster than they could run. The very air around them seemed to warp as the energy wave reached them. They couldn't outrun it. They couldn't escape it. But then, through the chaos, Elena saw something, a figure standing among the debris, watching the destruction unfold. It was Rook. His expression was unreadable as the energy wave cascaded toward him. "No!" Elena shouted, but it was too late. The blast reached Rook in an instant. His body was consumed by the surge of energy, his form disintegrating in a blinding flash of light. And just like that, the man who had once been the key to humanity's future was gone. A moment of darkness passed, and Elena could only watch as the weapon's aftermath swept across the landscape. She had failed. They had all failed. The future that had once been within their grasp was now a shattered dream, lost in the wake of their efforts. But as the dust settled, Elena knew one thing: the war wasn't over. Humanity would survive. They had no choice but to survive. And somehow, they would rebuild. But the cost of that survival? That was yet to be seen. The world around them was reduced to a smoldering wasteland. Felos 4, once a thriving colony, home to thousands, was now a desolate expanse, scarred by the aftermath of the Genesis Protocol's explosion. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt earth, the ground cracked and charred from the weapon's devastating energy wave. Elena stood motionless, her body battered and bruised, her mind numb from the horrors they had just witnessed. The destruction was beyond anything she could have imagined. The Genesis Protocol, the weapon they had once hoped would be their salvation, had become the instrument of their downfall. And Rook, the man who had once been a symbol of humanity's resistance, was now nothing more than ash, consumed by his own ambition. But in the silence that followed the storm of destruction, Elena realized something: they were still alive. She could feel the cold wind against her skin, hear the distant cries of her comrades as they regrouped. The fight wasn't over. They hadn't been wiped out. Not yet. Captain. Zara's voice cut through the haze, sharp and urgent. Elena turned to see her team gathering, some still on their feet, others crouched low, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. "Are you all right?" Zara asked, her eyes scanning Elena with concern. "I'm fine," Elena said, though her voice was hoarse. Her mind was still reeling from the catastrophe, but she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't afford to break down now. "How's everyone else?" "We're alive," Jay said, his tone grim but steady. "But the colony, it's gone. The Zal will be here soon. They won't wait long to capitalize on this." Elena nodded. The Zal would come. They always did. But something about the way they had moved so swiftly in the past told her they wouldn't be the only ones interested in what had just happened. The explosion, the devastation, it would send ripples through the galaxy. The balance of power had just shifted, and no one knew how far the fallout would reach. But there was one thing Elena knew for certain: they couldn't let this be the end. "We need to regroup," Elena said, her voice filled with resolve. "We still have a mission. Our people need us. We might have lost Felos 4, but we haven't lost the war. And we haven't lost humanity." Zara gave her a steady nod. "You're right. It's not over. But the Federation, what's left of it, will need something more than just resistance. We need to rebuild. The Genesis Protocol might be gone, but we have to find a way to turn this around." Jay stepped forward, his eyes burning with determination. "What about the rest of the resistance? The remaining colonies? We can't just hide in the ashes. We need to fight back." Elena glanced out over the wreckage, her gaze lingering on the horizon. The destruction of Felos 4 was a blow, but not a fatal one. If humanity could survive the fall of its greatest cities, it could survive anything. They had to take that spark of defiance and turn it into a fire that would spread across the galaxy. "I've already sent word to the remaining strongholds," Elena said. "The resistance will rally. It's not just about one weapon. It's about people. It's about our spirit, our will to survive. We might be the last hope, but that means we fight like we have nothing left to lose." As if on cue, a rumbling in the distance signaled the arrival of the Zal. Their massive ships, silent, menacing, began to appear on the edge of the atmosphere, casting long shadows over the ruined world below. But Elena didn't flinch. She stood tall, her hand gripping her weapon with steady resolve. She wasn't about to let humanity fall without a fight, not after everything they had endured, not after the sacrifice of so many. She would stand against the Zal. She would stand against anything that threatened her people. "The war's not over," Elena said, her voice clear, rising above the rumble of incoming Zal ships. "And as long as there's breath in our lungs, we'll fight. Humanity may be on its last legs, but we are still here. We are still alive." Zara and Jace stepped forward, flanking Elena. The others followed, their eyes burning with the same fire that had driven them from the beginning. They had lost a battle, but they hadn't lost the war. They had nothing left to lose. And that, Elena knew, was when humanity was at its strongest. As the Zal ships descended upon the scorched surface of Felos 4, Elena gave one last look toward the horizon. The future was uncertain, the cost of their survival heavy. But one thing was certain: humanity would survive. They would rise from the ashes of Felos 4, and they would take the fight to the stars. For they were humanity, the last hope in a galaxy full of darkness, and they would not be extinguished. Not today. Not ever.